It's midweek edition of Business Morning. Thank you for joining us. I am Bisi Adebayo. We start off with oil prices with extended losses today, hit by a surprise build in oil inventories in the U.S. and as OPEC and its allies left markets in limbo by delaying a formal meeting to decide whether to increase output in January. Brent crude oil futures were down 0.6% at $47.14 a barrel in early trade, while U.S. WTI crude was down 0.7% at $44.22 a barrel. Meantime, industry data from the American Petroleum Institute showed that U.S. crude inventories rose by 4.1 million barrels last week, compared with analyst expectations for a draw of 2.4 million barrels. But the numbers came after the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and Russia, known as OPEC+, postponed talks on next year's oil output policy to Thursday from Tuesday. And back home, the Central Bank of Nigeria has introduced an additional liquidity management tool tagged special bills in a bid to deepen the financial markets and enable the monetary authority with optimal regulations in support of economic recovery and sustained growth. According to a statement by the Apex Bank, the special bills will have a 90-day tenor with zero coupon, applicable yield at the issuance determined by the financial regulator. The instrument will be tradable amongst banks, retail and institutional investors, as well as qualify as liquid assets for deposit money banks in the computation of liquidity ratio. It states that the special bills will not be accepted for repurchase agreement transactions with the CBN and also not be discountable at the CBN window. Now, the month of November could be described as a historic one for the Nigerian stock market as investors recorded the biggest gain in recent months. So precisely on November the 12th, the Nigerian Stock Exchange triggered the circuit breaker for the first time since it was introduced in 2016, when the all-share index rose beyond the set threshold of 5%, triggering a 30-minute trading halt of all stocks. Now, lately, the stock market has been the only attractive viable option for Nigerian investors in the absence of alternate attractive investment option. Well, the acting MD at the Quadras Capital Asset Management, Gbolahan Aina, joins us now to tell us what other activities shaped the entire market in the month of November. Good morning and thank you for joining us on the program. Now, what are the key themes that shaped the market in the month of November?
Good morning, BC. Thanks for having me. Really, the month of November was quite interesting on all fronts, and I hope you made money because a lot of people made money in the month of November. A lot of the markets were bullish. The equity market, bond market was also bullish as well. Oil prices firmed up, and so it was quite an exciting month generally for the market. And in terms of what shaped the market, quite a number of things. The month of November was when we had the US election. So on the global front, we saw that shape a lot of things. We saw bond prices rally in the month of November. We saw oil prices also rally as well in the month of November. And in November as well, the COVID-19 vaccine was announced as well by Pfizer and BioNTech, and also by Moderna as well. So market also rallied on the back of that. We're looking at our own local space. I think the liquidity in the economy for the equity market. And like you said, the equity market has been quite interesting, at least for Nigeria. At the moment, Nigerian equity market is the third best performing stock on a dollar-adjusted basis, and the second best performing stock. The market has gained 31% year to date. And look at some of the key sectors. The insurance sector gained 35% in the month of 8% in the month of November. Oil and gas gained 0.6%. Banking gained 5.7%. Consumer goods gained 6.2%. While industrial goods gained 4%. And that's coming from like a period where the market was in a loss position. The market actually started very well this year, gaining 11% in January. But of course, that's reversed with the COVID-19 pandemic and the decline in oil price. So our Nigerian market is quite bullish at the moment and supported by the extra liquidity that we have. If you look at the bond space, that also experienced some bullishness as well. We're trading at unreasonable levels, if I may say. 50-year bond is currently at 7% levels. but it gained quite some, about 40 basis points in the month of November, and still supported by the liquidity that we have in the system. So in terms of the macro environment, I think there were some big announcements in the month of November. GDP figures came out, inflation figures came out. But GDP figures wasn't surprising. It was our official announcement into a recession. And when GDP figures came out, people were not surprised, but I guess people thought the decline would have been more. It was just a negative 3.6%. And in terms of what shaped the GDP figure, one was a slower pace of growth that we saw in the previous quarter. Nigeria compliance to the OPEC plus quarter. There was more compliance in Q3 than we saw in Q2. So in terms of production cut, there was a reduction in production, and that affected oil GDP. On the non-oil sector, it's still more of a COVID-19 narrative. So it had lingering effects on business activities, despite the fact that restrictions had been lifted. So the oil sector contracted by 2.51% year on year, and really contraction were in though agriculture again, we saw contraction in industries, -6%, contraction in services, and construction in services as well. So also another thing to also talk about in the month of November was inflation figures. And of course, inflation has been on an upward trajectory. So the October figures didn't come as a surprise. Inflation for the month of October was 14.23%, and that's up from the 13.71% that we saw in the month of September. Majorly stemming from food inflation. Food inflation rose by 72% to 17.38% for the review period. I think price increases were seen in bread and cereals, potatoes, and other tubers, meat, fish, fruits, and also some alcoholic and food beverages as well. And really, this is an increase from what we saw a month ago. I think core inflation also affected as well. But we expect inflation to still be on the uptrend, majorly based on food inflation. I think another major thing that we saw in the month of November was last MPC meeting for the year. And the MPC voted to maintain status quo. And really it was on a balance of factors. So they thought about if they had increased the rates, was going to more or less dampen whatever success they've recorded in terms of economic growth. So it was going to be counterproductive. So they didn't consider increasing the rate. If they had reduced it, their thinking was that there was going to be excess liquidity in the system, and really that might fall speculative demand on the dollar. And so that was like a no-no. So they thought to just wait and see the price decline, the change that they made in the last MPC meeting to see how it was going to affect the market. So status quo for the MPC meeting. I think another thing I'd like to touch on was the FX markets. Although the external reserve gained by 276 million for the month of November, but key thing was also depreciation in the INE window. We saw depreciation in the parallel market, and just to mention, so there was some circulars that came out this week from the CBN regarding the FX, and that seems to be driving demand. So we seem to see the liquidity in the system now. Before the circular came out, the parallel market had gone as high as 515. Yesterday came down to 505 naira to $1. So there seems to be a bit of stability in the FX market, and based on that circular. The initial circular had probably further a bit of speculative demand, but CBN came out to make a bit of clarification. Some people were not able to transfer from their DOM account, and CBN said that as long as it's a transfer, you can always transfer to, you have unfettered access to your dollar transfer. So those are some of the things that we saw that shaped the market in the month of November. It was quite an interesting month. Like I said, there was a lot of money to be made. The equity market gained 14% in the month of November, and currently year to date is at 31%. On a dollar-adjusted basis, Nigeria is currently the third best performing market with a 22% year-to-date return.
You talked about some of the recently released circular from the CBN. Of course, we also know that yesterday the CBN released another circular on banks, excess CRR to spur economic growth. How optimistic is the market about this?
So it's two things. So there was a circular that was supposed to release, and the circular was more or less CBN trying to release the CRR for banks to a special OMO. And in that circular, it wasn't too clear whether institutional investors and retail investors could trade the bill. The idea was that excess liquidity or that cash reserve ratio, so really the cash reserve ratio for banks is 27.5%, but for most banks, the effective CRR is about 40%. That means that excess is being sterilized at the CBN, earning 0%. And for a lot of banks, it's affected their ability to fund operations. And so with this, it means that liquidity is being released into the system. But I guess what people are waiting for is what rates is going to be advised for the special OMO, because that's going to affect a lot of things in the money market space. I suspect it's going to be higher than what we have at the moment. So we might see a bit of repricing in the short end of the curve. So some money market rates, treasury bill rates might begin to inch up. If you recall, treasury bill rates are currently at record low levels. The last auction that we saw in the month of November, the 1 year was about 0.03%. And I did mention before that really these are negative returns for investors. And for a lot of investors, it doesn't really make sense to be buying some of these instruments at these rates. So what we think is that there's going to be a bit of repricing. Banks are going to have a bit of liquidity to be able to fund some of their operations. But the CBN did say in initial circular that they are going to ensure that banks use it to fund the real sector. But the good thing is that the retail investors can trade it, institutional investors can trade it. If you recall, over a year ago, the window for retail and institutional investors trading in the OMO markets had been closed, and it was just the FPIs and the banks. But now it's more as if they are opening up the markets. So this is more instrument that can be traded and more liquidity in the system.
Now, I'm
quite optimistic if I will answer your question.
All right. So I was just going to say that we should dwell more on the equities market. Of course, many traders believe that the bull run may just continue into the end of the year. Do you see that happening as well?
Yes, I definitely think so. So really the low yield environments and really other prevailing market conditions are really for the bull run that we've seen. Why I suspect is that we might see a bit of profit taking as we enter December. But the question is really where the alternatives. Dividend yield on some of the equities is double digits, and which is quite attractive. The money market instrument will not do that sort of dividend yield. So on the dividend yield perspective, you can see a lot of people positioning. Like I did mention, that with yields at almost 0% levels, people don't really want to keep their money at that level. And so the equity market is still promising. I think what we're going to see is that we're going to see a bit of profit taking, some pocket of profit taking. I'm going to see a bit of renewed interest in the market in the month of December. So there's going to be like a December rally. There's going to be a Santa Claus rally. I still expect to see bullishness in the equity market. And really that defines the macro story. So the macro story in Nigeria is not too pretty at the moment. We're in recession, we're in stagflation, high unemployment, high inflation rate. There's still a bit of exchange rate issues as well. So it's just the liquidity that is swallowing the rally that we've seen in the equity market. And there's still nowhere to go. So I still expect to see a bit of bullish run in the equity market. But like we've been saying, people should look for fundamentally justifiable stocks, because this to make money at the same time is also very, very easy to lose money, because some stocks are trading at unjustified levels at the moment because of the rally that we've seen. But I still expect a bullish run in the equity market in the month of December.
Now, away from the equities market now, according to the CBN, the PMI improved in November, standing at 50.2 index points. Of course, that indicates a recovery from contraction in the manufacturing sector recorded since May. But what kind of signal does that send to investors in relation to the real economy and the markets?
So really what the PMI tries to show is how manufacturers perceive the economy. And really, like you mentioned, that the perception is that the economy is recovering. So any go above 50% shows that there's positivity or there's optimism. So that shows that there seems to be a bit of positivity in terms of how manufacturers view the economy. And they look at a number of indices so across new orders, across inventories, and a few other things, which is good. And like I mentioned, when the GDP figures came out, despite the fact that it was a negative decline, the decline was not as much as we expected. It was just a negative 3%. A lot of analysts we are told was going to be much more than that. So we think things are recovering, things are picking up, and with the announcement of the vaccine as well, though it might not come to Nigeria area as well, but it means that the global market is going to pick up. It means that there's going to be demand from the global market. There's going to be demand for oil, and that's probably going to also help our FX receipts or our dollar receipts as well, and that's good for our economy. So it's good. Just to answer what you said, yeah, a PMI rating of above 50%, 50 is good for Nigeria.
Now, for how long do you see foreign portfolio investors staying out of the Nigerian debt market?
So for the FPIs, so two things inform why they invest. One, return, and apart from return, they need to go to exit the market as and when they want to. So there's been an issue with FX, and that issue has not been solved. Until the FX issue is solved, that is when we probably see them to return to the market. But what some FPIs have been doing is they've been exiting the market through there's a gold ETF that we have. So most FPIs are exiting through that window. Some have exited in the past to the settler dual listing as well, Airtel. So until the FX issue is solved, I don't see them coming to the market. And it's quite simple. So for instance, an FPI probably makes a return about maybe 30% on their equity investment. If they lose on a dollar-adjusted basis by 50%, that means their real return is actually a negative. Because when they spend $10, they don't spend Nigeria. So for them, the real return is important for them. The dollar-adjusted return is important for them. And if there are still issues around FX, if there's issues around them being able to exit the economy or exit the market when they want to, that definitely goes to the effect. And that issue has not been solved. That issue is still lingering. So they're still going to hold on for a while until the FX issue is solved.
All right. Now, we've seen oil prices extend declines as OPEC Plus delays its meeting over oil production cuts. But what are your expectations from that meeting and the implications for Nigeria?
So in the immediate, I think they might extend the cut to 7.7 million barrels per day till January. And if that is extended, really, that is good for us. There are some people advocating that there should be more barrels coming to the market. And I don't see that happening because Saudi Arabia, which is the facto leader, wants the production costs to still exist for a while. So that's good for Nigeria. However, if the market is flooded with oil, we're going to see oil price crash like we saw it, I think it was in the month of February, when oil futures even got to 0% negative levels. So as long as they maintain the production cost, Nigeria is fine. Oil is currently trading between $4 to $45 per barrel. So Nigeria will be fine. But if the market is flooded with oil, that's when there's a cause for concern for Nigeria. So for me, I expect them to hold on to the production cost to January, and they might even extend it beyond January.
Now, a quick look at the Eurobond market in recent times suggests that SSA papers have been badly hit by the indecision of OPEC Plus on production measures. Now, the Angolan pair has been the worst hit, while Nigerian papers have been worsening from the middle to the long end of the curve. Any idea what investors should expect to change in the short term?
Okay, but in addition to that, so generally we've actually seen the bond prices rally. And I did mention two things were contributing to that. One was the US election, and one was the vaccine that was announced by Pfizer and Moderna. So for instance, while the post-bank paper that was issued at 8.6%, currently trading below 7% now, a lot of the corporate Eurobonds have gained about 10% in the past couple of weeks since the US election. So the market has been rallying, and so I still expect to see a bit of rally. But for the likes of Angola that seem to have an issue, maybe not have an issue, maybe that's not the right way to put it, because their performance is really linked to oil price. We've not seen so much rally that we've seen in some other corporates. But Nigeria as well, for Nigerian papers as well, I've seen a bit of rally in the past couple of weeks as well. I still think the rally is still going to extend, and being fueled majorly by two things: the vaccination and the US election. Those are primarily things that for the rallies that we've seen. But I guess by the outcome of today, I don't expect any major change in today's OPEC Plus announcements. So I don't expect anything dramatic to happen in the Eurobond market.
Many thanks, Acting FD, Codros Capital Asset Management. Well, I know. Thank you for sharing some of your thoughts with us this morning.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
We'll be talking about Nigeria's transport infrastructure when we return in just a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Now, ahead of the commencement of the African Continental Free Trade Area, key players in the transport sector have called for a comprehensive overhaul of Nigeria's transport mechanism to maximize business opportunities and build a sustainable transport system in the country. Recently, the Chartered Institute of Transport Administration organized a summit to address key issues affecting the slow pace of growth in the transport sector in a bid to tap into the opportunities in that transport and, of course, logistics subsectors. But I have with me from our Abuja studio the President, the Chartered Institute of Transport Administration, who also doubles as the Director General of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, Mr. Bashir Jamal, who joins us from our Abuja studio to discuss several issues in the country's transport sector. Good morning and thank you for joining us on the program. But before we begin the conversation, Mr. Jamal, we need to take this breaking story that another tanker fire has occurred along the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, causing a major gridlock around that axis. Now, the incident involving a tanker occurred in the early hours of today at Magboro bus stop, outward Lagos, but no casualty was recorded. Eyewitnesses told Channels Television that the firefighters arrived early to put out the fire. This is coming barely 25 days after a fuel-laden tanker went up in flames at the Kara end of Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. The Federal Road Safety Corps is, however, advising motorists planning to use the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway corridor to adequately plan their trips and use alternative routes where possible because of the gridlock caused by the lone incident. Now, let's continue our conversation with Mr. Jamal. Now, good morning once again, and thank you for coming on the program. Well, let me seize this opportunity to congratulate you on your re-election as the president of CIOTA. But how do you plan to use this to tap into the federal government's transformation drive in the transportation sector?
Thank you very much, BC, and good morning, Nigerians. You remember last year around this time, we gathered to discuss issues concerning the transport sector. This year's summit tried to address the issue of infrastructure. And as you are aware, transport is life, life is transportation. There is nothing we can do in life without transportation. Now, having been chartered sometimes in June last year, we now concluded the election of our executive council. As you mentioned, thank you very much for congratulating me. The job just begins. So what we intend to do now is to build the progress of the institute into three-fold. Transport development tripod, which dwell on professionalism, education, research and development, and then advocacy. And the institute position usually has to do with advocacy. We are not in a position to compel the government on what to do, but we always advocate on the best way possible to go. So in terms of professionalism, we have a couple of professional bodies like Nigerian Bar Association, like Chartered Institute of Accountants, like Institute of Bankers. So we are glad and happy to say that today we have a professional body that will have to regulate and look into this transportation sector. So in so doing, we will make sure that people practicing transportation in various economic areas must be professionalized. They must understand the rudiments of transportation system and what it takes to build the structure, the transport in line with the international best practices. Secondly, we will have to engage in training and retraining in terms of skill acquisition and also skill building so that we can have a sound and professional expert in the industry that can that can help the government to make sure the infrastructure that they are building now stand the test of time. As you are aware, BC, the major problem we are having in Nigeria is maintenance culture. Now, when we have a very sound and professional workforce to deal with that area, we will be able to maintain the meager resources we are using to build this infrastructure. Then the third leg of it, which is advocacy, from time to time we will have to look at areas of government concerns in terms of policy interventions, and then fiscal incentives, monetary incentives that will help to see that we have what it takes for the transport sector to stay and make basic necessity a very good platform for Nigerians and for public goods.
Now, I'm sure you heard the breaking story that we just mentioned some moments ago. Another tanker fire along the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Of course, this is just one of the so many accidents that we've had on the road. So if you're to talk about Nigeria's transport industry as a whole, would you even say that there has been any growth over the years, bearing in mind several infrastructure challenges? I know you've talked about infrastructure, but what do you see as? Do you think that we're recording any growth in the transport sector?
BC, without mixing words, there are a number of progress in the transport sector, but the only problem we are facing, the population as well as the successive government's efforts to build this infrastructure, you know, because of the meager resources is not enough. But let me take railway, for example. If you go to Apapa Port now, you will observe that there is a concerted effort by the government to build the rail line from the Apapa Port up, to link up with the Ibadan rail line. We have been experiencing serious problem with Apapa gridlock, and the major issue has to do with single transportation system we have, which is road transport. Instead of using the devices means of other means of transportation like inland waterways and water transportation, we always rely on road transportation using our own vehicles. You import goods from different parts of the world. As soon as it's landed in Nigeria, the two major ports we have, Tinkan and Apapa, have got only one or two roads. That is Apapa Oshodi in case of Tinkan, and then the Western Avenue Road in case of Apapa Port. So for the first time now, we are trying to revive the utilization of rail line from Apapa Port to the national grid, linking to the Ibadan rail line. So with this, you can see that even if we can have one, gauge of rail that can take at least 100 container at a time, you are taking off about 100 trucks off the road. Now, if the rail or the gauge decide to do 5 trips in a day, carrying containers, 100 containers from Apapa Port up to different destinations up to Ibadan, that means you will have 500 containers off, taking over 500 trucks. So we expect this project to be completed by the end of first quarter of 2021. Now, in so doing, we expect by 2021 April, the issue of Apapa gridlock is being solved. Look at Kaduna, Abuja rail line. It's been put in place for over 5 years now. We have been utilizing it. And then the Itape, Ajakuta Itape, I think it was last month, Mr. President, commissioned that particular project. And the Warri axis also is taken up in terms of I think they have already commenced work on that. And then we have what the other line that will start from Katsina, Maradi. So all this one is in terms of the Continental Free Trade Agreement that we have for Katsina, Maradi, which will link up into Niger, and the African Free Trade initiatives will now commence. So certainly, other part of transportation sector, when you look at aviation, you will see the Nigerian College Aviation in Zaria, they improved tremendously in terms of producing pilots. We have number of young pilots now on ground. There are a lot of improvements in aviation industry. You can see the infrastructural development in different airports we have across the country, and which within the next 6 months, you will see the advance of a lot of foreign investors into our own rail system. In terms of sea transportation, our major issue to do with maritime has to do with maritime insecurity, which most of the countries, they are finding it very difficult to come to Nigeria because of the fear of attack in terms of armed robbery or armed bandits at the sea, or even piracy attacks. Just 2 weeks ago, the president inaugurated a committee to go around and inspect the special projects the government introduced in terms of which is popularly known as Deep Blue Project, that will provide a total spectrum of our own water security waterways. This will take care of our own territorial water within the exclusive economic zones and even beyond. That is the Gulf of Guinea, which is the major part of the problems we are facing. And this project is expected to take off probably around before the end of March also this year. So BC, if you look at it, there are a lot of things that is being put in place. What we need is a little patience because the deterioration of this infrastructure has been for quite some time, for so many years and ages. The maintenance culture has not been so good, but certainly the answer to your questions, we observe a lot of great improvement. At our own side of the Institute, what we are trying to do now is to see how we can advise government to create enabling environment for the foreign direct investments to come in. Because the meager resources we have now in Nigeria may not be enough to fast-track this infrastructure.
Now, of course, you've given us a very broad overview of efforts to, of course, revamp the transport sector. But then let me dwell more on the maritime aspect now. Some states have adopted the use of ferries as a means of transport. Lagos State is an example. But are there plans to work with agencies like the Nigerian Inland Waterways Authority to regulate the activities of these operators owing to the frequent boat accidents reported?
Thank you very much for that questions. You see, the issue of safety in our own waterways, as far as the Nigerian Maritime Administration is concerned, is something that is eminent. If you look at even the name, signifies that the responsibility of the issue and the issue of safety lies heavily there. And we have been working hand in hand, if you are following the trends of events, in order to make sure that we synergize our own efforts and we allow our own enabling laws work hand in hand with all the agencies. We created the chief executive of the maritime industry meetings, which we do it monthly, where we have cases and problems that conflict each other among the agencies of government. We will now sit down and sort it out together. I have been in touch with the Lagos State Governor, and the Lagos State Governor linked me up with the man in charge of the waterways authorities of Lagos State, and he has been with us. We have been working hand in hand to ensure that we enforce all the necessary guidelines the users of ferries followed in terms of safety. And then, you know, we must make sure that we train the drivers of these ferries to the level that they will ensure that safety first in everything they do, as well as the owners of jetties that allow these ferries to take off at certain hours, which is not being allowed by law. For instance, after 6 o'clock, we don't allow. Most of the accidents that you do see, it comes off sometimes as a result of lack of use of personal protective equipments like life jackets and other things, or using an old, boats or on substandard, ferries, as well as, lack of knowledge and training by the drivers of these boats and ferries. So from time to time, we sit down, compare notes, and make sure that our enforcement officers move around and implement and enforce such laws that prevent them from moving around without following the guidelines of safety.
Now, when you look at the contribution of the transport sector to the nation's GDP in the third quarter of 2020, it stands at 1.28%. What can be done to improve the sector's contribution to economic growth?
BC, the problem we have in terms of data collections that can approve the level of contributions of the maritime sector, I think has a tremendous problem. But we are working between the Chartered Institute of Transport Administration of Nigeria, the University of Lagos, and the Nigerian Institute of Transport Technology, Zaria, to make sure that we bring all the players of the industry together so that we can start collecting data on contributions that each sector or each organization provides to the GDP. It is after this research, we will now have to key in with the National Bureau of Statistics to bring out the real contributions the maritime sector do provide. Certainly 1.28% is too low. From our own research and what we are targeting now is to see that the projection of $1.6 trillion that the maritime industry forecast to harness from the maritime sector is going to be over and above the contributions of oil and gas, more than 30%. But because of our inability to synergize what each organizations contributes in terms of GDP, we can only align ourselves to 1.28%. But certainly, we are working hard. Before the second quarter of next year, I think you will see a tremendous improvement towards the contributions of maritime sector into the GDP.
I'm sure we all look forward to that. It's been quite an interesting conversation with you, President, Chartered Institute of Transport Administration, as well as the Director General of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, Mr. Brashir Jamal. Thank you for speaking with us this morning on the program.
Thank you, VC. Thank you very much.
We'll be doing a review of the markets when we return in just a moment. Juliana Olayinka is already standing by to run us through this morning's top headlines from the UK. Good morning, Juliana. Well, it's December the 2nd, and that means that the second lockdown in England ends today, and the MPs have voted in favour of tougher new system coming into force. And this is coming just as the UK has become the first Western country to license the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID vaccine. How is this news being digested this morning?
Well, I've got to tell you, this Pfizer-BioNTech news is absolutely huge. It's such a massive story and a big, big, big sigh, huge sigh of relief to Boris Johnson's government, and really does, and I've got to say, put Britain up there with being obviously one of the best countries in the world. To think after COVID-19 has ravaged the economy, crippled sectors, taken about 1 million jobs, the fact that Britain will become the first country in the world to administer this vaccine is absolutely incredible. It's a massive story here, and all of the scientists and the health ministry should be incredibly proud of themselves. 800,000 doses of this Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine will be administered as early as next week, Monday, which even seems completely strange to be saying that, given how COVID has gripped the entire world. The first vaccinations on a population will be delivered on Monday morning here in Britain. We do have a couple of statements. Obviously, the story is still developing and still breaking. But the Department of Health has said the government has today, the British government, accepted the recommendations from the MHRA. The MHRA are the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Authority. Britain have managed to get an emergency application in ahead of America and ahead of Europe. Their regulations are a lot more tight. So the MHRA have approved the Pfizer-BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine for use. This follows months of rigorous clinical trials and thorough analysis of the data by experts. The Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation will shortly also publish its latest advice. That's from a government spokesperson. Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, obviously has been doing the rounds on British media. He said this is fantastic news. The MHRA, the fiercely independent regulator, has clinically authorised the vaccine for rollout. From early next week, we will start the programme of vaccinating people against COVID-19 here in the country. So, yeah, this is absolutely huge news, a huge sigh of relief. And now, of course, the entire world will be looking at Britain to see just how this is going to work. Because, of course, I'm sure you've seen it, Bissy. I'm sure many of our viewers have seen it. I have seen it. There is a lot of scepticism, especially going around on WhatsApp. It's usually WhatsApp. People saying, don't take the vaccine. The vaccine's evil. The vaccine's wicked. It isn't. They've got the data. The science has proven that the vaccination works. So really and truly, I think now it's going to be the government's going to have a tough task on its hand to convince the British public that the vaccination isn't a conspiracy theory. It is safe. It is going to protect the most vulnerable. And yes, I can't emphasize enough just how much of a massive story this is.
Yes, Juliana, and perhaps this also comes as some good news for retailers who now have 23 days to save Christmas. Is this enough time to save more businesses from collapsing like Debenhams and Arcadia?
It's not enough time, Bissy. No, it's not. We know this because even before COVID, we were having so many discussions on this programme just about how the British High Street is dying. But I'm not going to, lie. I came out of Oxford Circus this morning and it was very, very busy. Not only are you getting the British media who, of course, want to take pictures of people rushing and elbowing each other to get the biggest deals, but people have clearly come out. People have come out to shop. We are expecting there to be lots and lots of sales of up to 80%, 90% as retailers are fiercely trying to get rid of their stock. And of course, Black Friday sales. Some people are doing Black Friday from the beginning of November. Some people will be doing Black Friday sales until the end of the year, just so they can desperately get people back into the shops. And I think British shoppers are going to be very, very savvy. They will be going to places where they know that they can get deals. And it has been a pretty terrible year for many people. So some people are desperately looking forward to Christmas. They've been given the permission to meet up with their loved ones, and they want to spend the little earned money that they have in their pockets. And we are starting to see signs of that. If I saw that at 7:30 a.m. local time in the morning, only who can guess what it's going to be like at lunchtime. But hopefully it will be a good end to the week, because of course that devastating collapse of Debenhams, the 242-year-old company, and the Arcadia Group, with the likes of the giants of Topshop falling, will certainly have a ramification and a sentiment that will lie with other smaller retailers.
Now let's talk Brexit, Juliana. Time is fast running out. What's the latest?
It's hard to say what the latest is, I'm afraid, Bissy, because we're just not getting enough out. All we get is, doorstop sound bites from Michel Barnier, the EU chief negotiator, not really hearing much from Lord David Frost, who is his UK counterpart. Michel Barnier is still in London with a very big team trying to get past this red line with Britain. It is getting tough. Time is ticking. We've been saying this for 3.5 years. We've definitely been saying this for the past couple of months. According to sources close to the matter, fishing rights, state aid, governance still blocking progress. The Duchy of Lancaster, Michael Gove, very senior cabinet minister in charge of a no-deal exit. He was speaking yesterday and he said that the EU still want to take advantage of Britain's abundant fishing waters and they're not happy about it. Britain is still not happy that the EU still want to retain control over certain parts of British way of life, and they're not going to budge on it. So who knows? It really is 50-50 whether we come crashing out or not. But it's in everybody's best interest, and especially those who have been ravaged by COVID-19, to get a deal. It's been emphasised by the leader of the opposition, by the Bank of England governor, by Western allies across the world, but whether or not they can do it in time, given the fact that the EU still does have 27 individual nations, is going to be tough. And apparently Angela Merkel, German Chancellor, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, are at loggerhorns over this too.
Well, perhaps we'll get some clarity in this in the coming days. Thank you, Juliana. We'll see you much later. And back home, let's just do a quick review of yesterday's market activities at the NSE, where the all-share index got off to a bright start to the month of December with a 0.3% uptick following buying interest in Tier 1 bank names like GT Bank, Zenith Bank and Access Bank. But let's get more details of the trading plus an outlook for today from an analyst at Cardinal Stone Research, Michael Wakala. Good morning. Can you tell us what the market is looking like at the moment? Are we likely to see the bull run extend till today?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. So looking at the activities yesterday, despite the 30 basis points gain driven by banks, guaranteed and access, the market sentiment was pretty weak, right? We had 22 users as opposed to just 15 gainers. And that weak sentiment has more or less persisted throughout the week. We might see the market just give way to the weak sentiments that have been lingering on for a while now on Thursday. And we expect to see some profit taking in today's session. So, it's an expectation that today might be the day that the sixth consecutive bull run comes to an end, but we kind of, wait to see what happens.
Of course, analyst, Cardinal Stone Research, Michael Nwakolo, thank you for your input this morning.
Yeah, right.
And that's where we end today's program. Thank you for watching. I am BC Adebayo.